It has been over a year since Square Enix and created Business Unit 3 introduced us to Final Fantasy XVI, and now with this week's PlayStation State of Play we have been finally given more information and a brand new trailer to visit. In today's video we're going to be breaking that trailer down for every single bit of information I can glean from it. Without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So here we are, right off the bat. We have the narrator and obviously the trailer introducing us to the idea of what dominant is. Dominants are basically individuals inside of Final Fantasy XVI's world, are individuals empowered with the abilities of gods. In this case, the game refers to them as icons. For those that may have played previous Final Fantasies, you may have seen them referred to as summons, eidolons, and espers. Now, they all possessed an affinity with a certain element. So in this case here, we're introduced to the Garuda. Garuda is of earth. There are various others that will have fire, lightning and things like that, with the exception of the Eidolon Bahamut. Bahamut is an Eidolon that will have the power of a non-elemental type, which is usually a power or a magic type that kind of ignores any defensive values at all. It's just raw damage. Now, I've got to kind of rewind the trailer a little bit here to kind of show how intimate this power is, or an Eidolon and a dominant are. We are shown this shot here where you see all of these different nerve endings, and then the being growing out of a human. And yeah, there are going to be a lot of these within Final Fantasy XVI's universe. And here is a shot of the Eidolon Bahamut.
Illit aspect might reveal itself. The icon.
There's going to be another war, isn't there?
Now here we are introduced to two characters here, or reintroduced to one of them should I say. So we have Clive, the character on the right. This game will span over a time period, with eventually seeing Clive grow into an adult man. I'm not too sure who this woman is to the left, or girl at this point, but I have a suspicion this girl might be Shiva. Shiva is an icon that will possess the ice element, and throughout Final Fantasy XVI, Shiva and Ifrit have shared a relationship. In some of the games it's been a sort of romantic interest between the two icons. I said Eidolons earlier, but I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I'd imagine these two have a romantic interest as characters, and the player character of Clive will eventually possess the icon of Ifrit and all the associated fire abilities. Now, on a quick one, Creative Business Unit 3 is the development studio behind Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV's director serves as this game's producer. We have the music composer behind 14, who is creating music for this game, as Masayoshi Soken. Now, pay attention to Final Fantasy XIV's composer, because I'm starting to believe that there's a theory going around that 14 and 16 are games that are linked in some way or another, and I think the music in this very trailer kind of hints at that very specifically.
Every day we delay brings us closer to disaster.
Now here we are given a first glimpse at the UI, and this develops and further on is true with more elements added into it. So first and foremost here, now Final Fantasy XVI up to now has only presented us with Clyde as the player character, and normally in Final Fantasy you usually have a party with several other members. In modern Final Fantasy titles that number is usually 3. Past titles are usually about 4. So in this here we are presented with icons up here. I think 16 will ditch away with the party system, and instead what I think it's going to do here, I hinted at the top, is have icon abilities in place of party members, which I find very interesting here. So at the start here, the character of Clive here is presented with Phoenix, and underneath is a smaller one, which I'm going to assume is Garuda, as alluded to earlier on in the story, which might mean in somewhat of the early game of 16, the player character in question will maybe slay or be blessed with the power of Garuda. So we have L2 here highlighted in between these two, which will mean that you'll swap between the abilities of the two icons, rather than you swap between party members as you would do normally in a traditional Final Fantasy sense. Obviously, we've got a HP bar here and the player character's levels, and a target bar for the enemy you're fighting. Although I'm not too sure here if this is an example of it or this is a real-time cutscene where we're seeing this before the fight actually starts.
We must move now.
And yeah, again, like I said, this UI it develops, and we see more elements of it as it carries on. Now, I'll draw your attention here to the middle right side first, because we see a precision dodge ×3, precision counter burst, and lunge. They're either passive abilities that the player character might get as he levels up, or this game might tinker with Final Fantasy XII's version of a gambit system, where you might input a button and a string of commands might follow suit. I'm not too sure 100% how this is worked, but that's one or two things happening there. Now, in the lower right, we are introduced to fire, attack, phoenix shift, and jump abilities here. And for those that have played Final Fantasy XV, you'll recognize that layout almost instantly. So it kind of suggests to me we're going to be able to assign abilities and moves to the triangle, square, X, circle, and cross buttons on the controller. As you level up and a given icon, you're going to be able to assign your own sort of combat style as you will. And again, bear in mind, as I said earlier, you're going to be able to swap between Garuda and Phoenix's abilities. So you're going to be able to kind of like mix and match abilities, and you'll get an example of that later on in this trailer. In the bottom left, hotkeys are assigned to the directional pad: potion, high potion, strength tonics. So potions, items that buff will all be assigned to the D-pad, which is very interesting. Now, you're not going to kind of see it with this because I've got this getting in the way, but at the top you're able to see what buffs the player character is getting. This is kind of annoying because it's annoying that that's in the way, but moving on. Now, obviously, numbers are all back, so you can visibly see how much damage the player character is doing to its target, which is awesome. Here on the bottom right, we have Scarlet, Cyclone, Rising Flames, Phoenix Shift, and Jump. Now, I don't know if they change situationally or not, depending on how high the damage that you do. We're introduced to a new element later on in the trailer, and a familiar mechanic to some, where again the moves change. Now, I don't know whether or not that is circumstantial or you're going to be able to manually get to it. More on that in a minute.
The chaos he would wreak would sweep all of Valisthea into the abyss.
So you see here how you have that circle that is about to come into the moves on the D-pad. So again, the player characters create this target skyward, and then this is coming in. So now maybe it's a suggestion that where you can string more combos, maybe the positionals. So if the enemy is vulnerable and floating in the air, you're able to get to these moves, and when you're in a situation such as this here, obviously Garuda being wind, which is we can see up here in the top left, your player character will have access to moves because of where the position of the enemy is. Also, we've had more development here on the UI. So those that have played Final Fantasy XIV, this the three bars here should almost be instantly recognizable to those. This to me suggests that the limit break system is making a return to Final Fantasy XVI. Now, for every bar is a level. In Final Fantasy XIV, the more bars that are filled, the stronger the limit breaks effect is. And my assumption here is that exact same mechanic is present here. We're also introduced to a third icon, which looks to be Titan. So, and I think it's within this part of the trailer you're going to see the player press R2 and swap between the two icons to gain access to new moves. See that right there? Swap to Titan. Moves have now changed in the bottom right. There's upheaval, wind up, Titanic block, and now jump. So we've just used Garuda. Within the air, it's used a move. Deadly Embrace and Iconic Strike have been procced, activated. And now you can quite quickly see he's using upheaval. And now visually you can see Titan's fist has now formed around his arm. And he's about to follow up with another attack. Up goes the damage, and AoE has now activated because of his used upheaval. For those that have played upheaval, you'd be very familiar with that move because Warriors got that did almost a similar thing. And all of these passives have now activated collateral upheaval ×6, so that must activate per unit attacked with the upheaval maneuver and then ability finish. Someone was obviously killed, so there is a passive buff system to the characters somewhere in this game, which is really cool. Carrying on. And with this shop, again, I suggested before, we're going to have a very familiar mechanic return, the stagger system. Now, for those that aren't too sure what that is, the stagger system is a gauge that increases in depending on how much damage you do consistently to an enemy type. Once it reaches a certain threshold, it leaves the enemy in a weakened state. That threshold will change depending on the enemy type. So for boss encounters, the threshold to stagger is either circumstantial or it takes a greater amount of damage for you to get the enemy to that state. And what that does is then allows you to deal a multiplier's worth of damage. Maybe there might be more buffs that might increase how much damage you do during a stagger system. Who knows? Drawing your attention back to the upper left, we now see Odin, Shiva, and Ramor here. Now again, so the objective of the player character at least is to slay these icons and gain their power. For what purpose? We've got no idea as of yet. Obviously, with Odin here, we have a new gauge, so we're not too sure what that is. Maybe it might be gun gear. So yeah, he's literally just pressed it, and now a circle has just formed around it. And again, because obviously he's a cheese stagger, we can see that he's doing an increased damage multiplier of 0.2 over the normal one, which is, and then iconic punishment has now activated. And you just saw the player characters just go absolutely crazy with gun gear.
I unite the dominance. That's what.
And now we've been given a glimpse at some of Shiva's passive abilities. So he's targeting Coral here, and he's using an ability called Cold Snap, which freezes his target in place. Now, I'd imagine for some enemy types have some resistances, you know, for like ice, fire, but Coral here seems to be very susceptible to it. So Cold Snap has just worked straight away. And again, for you that might have played Final Fantasy XIV, when you fought Shiva, her to move from one phase to the other, she performs like a wind maneuver around the enemy and uses Cold Snap instantly to freeze them all in place.
We may bring an end to the strife.
And then there we go. He's just used, I believe that was what was it, like Cloud Strike before? Thunderstorm, right? So he's just used Thunderstorm.
An end to the strife.
And there you go. And now he's switched to Garuda's moves, and now he's possessed Arrow. And again, there's like some sort of like timer or cooldown around it, much like how we saw with Odin's maneuver before. Oh, and then here we go. Here's also Gambit counter. So there is a Gambit system. So there are going to be a set of instructions that you're going to be able to create to build your character around, which is, again, that is another layer added to the combat system. So enemies will have different varied weaknesses, and so you're going to need to alternate between which icon you want to use. And then you've got moves that you're going to be able to assign to which circumstances You might find yourself in a given boss battle, which will allow you access to certain moves or abilities.
Order to see us unto tomorrow.
And then on top of that, you've got the stagger system. So you've got all these moving elements that you're going to be able to kind of drive and punish your enemy, be rewarded with the stagger system, and then punish them even further.
If I take the field, our duel will shake.
And let me just wind this back a little bit. So again, touching upon the idea of dominance. I think here we are being introduced to possibly two more of these dominants. Now here we're possessed with this character here, this huge muscular dude. Now judging by character design here, this is the dominant of Titan, and I suspect this old fellow here on the left is another one, but I'll touch upon him later on because we'll be formally introduced to all the icons later. Although there is an absence with some of them on who their associated dominants are.
Duel will shake the island.
And we are introduced to another fight where we see Clive here fighting the character of Hugo. And yeah, it looks like he is channeling some of those Titan abilities here. So this kind of tells me Creative Business Studio 3 are a studio that created Final Fantasy XIV, which is an MMO game. Those boss battles in Final Fantasy XIV kind of happen in different phases. I have a bit of a sneaking suspicion that this game is going to follow suit. So with this, we have been introduced to, let's just say phase 1, although it could possibly be phase 2 of a given fight with Titan. So we're going to fight him in his human form, possessing some of his Titan abilities, and that bar is going to be a depletion of his health for the first stage, and then we get a second.
To its foundations.
Introducing phase 2. Now we've fought him in his human phase, we've driven that bar down, now he's deciding to kind of transform or summon, use his icon. Now in that a battle just before, take note, Shiva isn't here, but now with this, I don't know whether or not this will be the same fight or that young girl might be offering her assistance within this fight. Maybe we will see a party system here, but possibly not. Or maybe this fight that we're about to see happens later on in the game. And this is the icon Shiva. Again, Shiva is of the ice element. Now, if you kind of notice her clothing is all white, light blue. The young girl that we saw earlier on in the trailer, has that kind of similar dress sense. Think Power Rangers here. So literally the Power Rangers wear clothing of the Power Ranger they morph into. Same sort of premise. Bit of a poor comparison to make. You get the idea though. And here we go, back them up. And we are introduced to the icon Odin. Odin usually kind of it's usually darkness is usually his element. And here we are, Ifrit and Phoenix. Now for those that have been following Final Fantasy XVI right now, these two icons in particular are of the key art of Final Fantasy XVI. Now there's going to be some sort of time skip, as we've said. Now in the first Awakening trailer, we kind of saw the young boy of Josh scream and Phoenix erupts out of him. And as we know already, the main character, Clive, is going to possess Ifrit. The two characters of Joshua and Clive are brothers, and there's going to be an event that will have these two people be pit against one another. And yeah, here we go. This is a very interesting shot. So obviously, as this trailer has gone on, the UI has evolved and changed, but here it's been stripped down. So now we have Phoenix versus the icon of fire, that being Ifrit. Maybe this is the event where the main character will get the ability of Ifrit. So this might suggest that he might have to slay his brother given certain circumstances. Because as we saw before, he was using the Phoenix ability, but now he's got Ifrit. And yeah, we go. Then there's Ifrit and Titan. So yeah, again, I was trying the idea before of there being like 2 stages of these boss fights. So we're going to be fighting these characters, I know, as humans, and then there's going to be this like Godzilla versus King Kong like phase to it all. It's really rather exciting. And again, this game is exclusive to the PS5 as far as consoles are concerned, and it will come to PC in roughly a year's time, using Final Fantasy VII Remake as the element of, you know, speculation there. And here we're introduced to Ramo. Now, Ramo is the icon of thunder, and obviously I need to kind of dial this back a little bit because I've literally just caught something here which I find rather interesting. So in this shot, there's a rather unrecognizable image here, and I'm not too sure who this might be. Yeah, so there's an icon here we're not familiar with as of yet, which is going to be, yeah, this is going to be very interesting. So maybe we might get more icons in this game than this trailer is letting on, which is, again, the prospect of that's amazing. I know Shiva performing her iconic move of Diamond Dust.
There will be losses, it is true.
So yeah, like I say, so yeah, these icons are very, very important to this game's story. They pretty much were in Final Fantasy XIV as well. So yeah, we've got, you know, Odin and Bahamut here. So I don't know whether these are live action scenes or this is how combat is expected to be, but I really do look forward to this.
Another can be bred. Every home.
Yeah, so yeah, you saw Mega Flare right there, just, you know, that's being used mid-fight, but there's a removal of, you know, the buttons that we saw earlier on from the bottom left and right. But, you know, real-time cutscenes here, so there's going to be no breaking gameplay. Maybe during a fight, you use the mechanics introduced earlier to get to a certain instance where, right, you can use Mega Flare. In the older Final Fantasies, let's just say 7, 8, and 9, when you use the summon, you get like a cutscene of this attack happening. It kind of served as a bit of a break between combat, if you will, and you just got this massive spectacle of an attack. Maybe the same thing's happening here, but in real time, so it isn't like a proper, you know, like, I know, a proper like break in between battles and combat.
Every home that burns, another can be built. The Empire will live on.
So yeah, here we're being introduced to another character who might serve as the leader of another kingdom. So think Final Fantasy XV, how we had 2 empires of Niflheim and Insomnia. Noctis' father served as king of Insomnia, and we had that old guy, I can never remember his name, because he wasn't really an important character, but he used to lead, you know, old Niflheim. So we've got certain countries, states, you know, whatever, you know, thing you want to use here, are odds with one another that are no doubt probably weaponizing these dominance, you know, against one another. So I kind of like, you know, propel this game's story forward. And yeah, here we go. And this is where, you know, like I was saying earlier, we'll be introduced to some of these icons with their dominance. This is Joshua, the young boy that I said earlier that we were introduced to in the first trailer. Titan, this is that Yugo. Garuda, and we've been given this feminine fatale. Now, I'm not too sure what her name is as of yet. I do know there is a Final Fantasy XVI website that will have, sorry, not what will have, that has loads of information, some of these characters, you know, locations and things like that. I plan on putting out a series of videos where we kind of look into all of that and kind of find out what's what, so stay tuned to that one. And here we go, Ramo. Now this is the point where the game will introduce the icons, but doesn't tell you who their dominants are. So speculation is in the wind at the moment as to who these icons' dominants are. Yeah, now again, if it's a very interesting one, because it leaves out the player character of Clive here with Ifrit, but we know from key art, like, I'll even show you my desktop here, so let me me just hide. Oh, I can't hide it. Yeah, so even with the key art, when we look here, we've got this like firearm, all these spikes coming off of the, of Clive here. This is him as an adult. So yeah, Ifrit is associated with him, but I find it really interesting. The trailer leaves that information out. So yeah, carry on. Oh God. And here we go. We again the key art, the cover art of your Final Fantasy, Phoenix versus Ifrit.
Awaken, child of fate.
And this is Clive as an adult. Oh well, we're not too sure what this marking means. Because in the Awakening trailer, it looked like he served as some sort of like military unit. Maybe these guys are, whatever this unit means, as that they're tasked with maybe fighting, capturing, possessing the power of all the icons later down the line. Maybe that might serve as, again, how a party could be introduced into this game. But again, it's not confirmed. But the feeling I have is that the icons are going to serve as something akin to party members instead. And here, and this is where again it gets me even more confusing where Ifrit specifically is concerned. We've got two there somehow fighting one another. So yeah, maybe the Ifrit we seen fighting Phoenix earlier on isn't the Ifrit possessed by Clive. I'm not too sure how that's working as of yet. Yeah, that's it as far as the trailer's concerned. Now, we've got this here, summer 2023. Now, I think this is a red herring. So, obviously, building up to this trailer coming out, we've heard in various news outlets and interviews, Naoki Yoshida, if I pronounce his name right, has said that this game was close to completion, and as of now, this game is in a playable state, start to finish. He's put various statements out since this trailer saying that this game is basically going to spend the next year being polished. Now, this year, we have the anniversary of Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy is a franchise, so its 35th birthday. I've got a sneaky suspicion that this is bait. I think this game is due to come out in November this year. I really do. But we'll see on that front. And obviously, if we do get any news regarding that, I'll be sure to share it here on this channel. Now, earlier on, I mentioned about a potential connection between Final Fantasy XIV and 16. Remember that the same studio that created Final Fantasy XIV Business Development Unit 3 are also making Final Fantasy XVI. The other thing they share in common is it's the same composer, Masayoshi Soken, and I think there is a further hint in this trailer that might suggest that there is a potential link in some form or another between the two games. And I mean it in the sense of in both the games' worlds, ignoring the fact it's the same studio. Now, I've put a clip together with segments from Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker's trailer. Endwalker is the latest expansion of this year of Final Fantasy XIV. So I'll bring up the trailer and the footage right now. Now, with this bit, I want you to pay very close attention to the music used. Ignore the voice acting.
You took your time. 'Tis as we feared. The respite afforded this land was but fleeting.
So you hear that, melody motif, that yeah, right, Peter, right.
The end draweth nigh.
Did you catch that? Let's play it again.
You took your time.
will be losses, it is true. Yet for every citizen...
Yeah, so Masayoshi Soken likes to leave little hints and things like that inside of his music, or pieces of music that might have a particular story to tell between them. So it's always worth paying very close attention to what he does. Masayoshi Soken is an absolute genius with his work. I firmly believe he is the new generation's, I don't want to say version, but if we had, within the Final Fantasy titles, a new person who filled Nobuo Uematsu-san's shoes, it'd be Masayoshi Soken. The guy has produced hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of music for Final Fantasy XIV alone. His work is absolutely outstanding. Again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, watching the breakdown video with me. I've got more videos to come on Final Fantasy XVI, and I obviously plan on streaming this game as soon as it comes out on launch date. Get the time booked off work, and we're going to absolutely go ham. If you've liked this and you like, the idea of more content coming from it, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It massively helps the video, and it helps me, get more viewers for streams and things like that. I stream on Twitch as well, and you'll find me on Twitter and various other social media platforms. Links will be down in the description below. Thank you for your time, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.
All of which is to say, expand your horizons, go forth and seek discovery. Some of the civilizations in the reflections will surprise you.